Hello, welcome, and thank you all for joining us tonight for Friends of Iman's 4th annual Interfaith Iftar. My name is Jack Reeder.
And I'm Nada Ahmed.
The gathering that we're having today is one of a number of gatherings that our congregation has done throughout this holy month. And I was remiss in not beginning my comments with saying Ramadan Mubarak to everyone and wishing you a holy fast and experience. On Friday evening this past week, our congregation led a very brief service and headed out to a mosque in Katy to join another panel and join them to break their fast together. On Monday, there was a fast of solidarity with the Jewish and Muslim communities, as Monday was a fast day for the Jewish community as well. So Jews who fasted through the fast of Tammuz and the Muslim community that is fasting, of course, for Ramadan, broke their fast together, something that was taking place around the world. So I just want to pause and really recognize the importance of us coming together in dialogue and understanding and trust and building these bridges every day that we can, taking advantage of the opportunities to break down prejudice and misunderstanding in our workplaces and our places of our neighborhoods and our schools. Wherever hatred and mistrust and misunderstanding exists, it is up to those of us who are in this room, we're preaching to the choir here, to stand up for each other and build bridges of trust and understanding.
Asked them as question number 1 was, define compassion as you understand your faith to define it. So let's see, starting off with Kimberly, how similar the definitions are or different. So, Pastor Orr.
Thank you. Well, as we were backstage, we were discussing that, you know, coming from the Abrahamic tradition, we hope we have something different to say on some of these, and I'm sure we will. But as far as how from Christianity, generally compassion is seen is, I was really thinking about this earlier, is if you take the word apart in English, compassion, it means with passion. That means that you're engaged with the world around you with a passionate heart full of love that comes from God. On our own, as you said, we're fallen people, but through the grace and love of God, we can be filled with grace and love for others regardless of who they are or where they come from. So in my faith tradition in Methodism, we have a long tradition of anti-slavery activism, of activism in human rights, and so we actively reach out through ministries at our church in compassion, with passion for humanity, built in the image of God.
So in Judaism, our Hebrew word for compassion is rachamim. And the root of that word, all Hebrew words have a root, is rechem, which is the same word for womb, actually. And really, for me, what this says is that the idea behind compassion is that we're supposed to see each other as if we all come from the same womb, so that we're all brothers and sisters and mothers and children and parents all at the same time, all coming from that same place. There's a famous midrash, a story in our tradition, that there were 2 brothers who lived kind of on adjacent properties to one another, and one brother had a family and the other brother didn't have a family. And the one without a family said to himself, you know, if my brother, if something happens to him, then his family is going to need to be taken care of. I'm going to give him some of my food. And the other brother with the family said, if something happens to my brother, there's nobody to care for him, so I'm going to give him some of my food. And in the middle of the night, they would each take half of their stockpile of food and go put it in the other person's storage bin. And every morning they would wake up and they would see that it was just as full as it was the night before, and they'd be very confused by this. And after 4 days, they kind of saw each other from the other ends of the field as the light was coming up, and they kind of realized what happened in that moment. And according to our tradition, that's where our sacred temple was built, was on that same land of those two brothers. So for us, really, it's this idea of really seeing each other in our situations as brothers and sisters, which should be the root and the resting place of our spiritual tradition.
Dr. Kundi.
You know, according to the Quran, compassion and mercy are divine attributes that we are all asked to cultivate in ourselves. Before a Muslim starts any act, we always say the words Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And the root word comes actually from what Levi said. And what it basically means is we as human beings are asking God to be, or our Creator to be compassionate and merciful to us. But it's also a reminder that if you want compassion and mercy for yourself, then you must soften your heart towards those who deserve your mercy and compassion. So whereas it is a prayer that you are asking for yourself, you're actually being reminded that you have to give that same to your human fellows if you want the same for yourself.
Very well said, ladies. Okay. So now this could easily be a pretty warm, fuzzy kind of a discussion back and forth. But I did take one pointed question, and with due respect to everybody, I want to ask, look at the world around you, and this time describe lack of compassion exhibited by your co-religionists.
Now I get the tough one, huh?
You can tell that was an easy one.
Okay. Let me put it this way. In Islam, one of the things that we are taught about is fix your home first before you think about starting to fix the rest of the world. And I think in the current atmosphere, we have tons of things going on in the Muslim world that speak volumes about intolerance towards our own human Muslim fellows. Whether it is sectarian violence that we see in Southeast Asia, like Pakistan and India, whether it is Burma, whether it is Iraq, whether it is Syria. So I want to start with that. For me, that is more important, is how, even though we are in the same religion, how are we behaving towards each other? And then, of course, we can increase this conversation to see what is happening in the current world. Yes, there are some stark realities that we all face, and what is happening in the Middle East, between Israel and Palestine, what is happening in other parts of the world. We are not closing our eyes to it, but I think we also need to understand is that this is just part of something much bigger. This has got to do more with human behavior, not so much with religion.
Thank you for saying that. So, I mean, I'm going to just speak a little bit just from my current experience of what it's like to be kind of a rabbi in a Jewish community. And I think one of the things that we're struggling with right now is really how do we include a variety of people with various disabilities. And I think that it's something that we're really struggling with as a community, and it's something that we're working on, and there's a lot of good organizations like Matan out there who are working on it, but I think that it's something that we still don't do well. And in fact, I was thinking about this, and I got a phone call today from an organization, and they said, you know, we'd really like you to do a 10, 15 session class for our adults with disabilities. And immediately I started thinking about every reason why we couldn't do it or why it wouldn't work, and because it was scary to me in some way because it's not my comfort level. And then I just had to kind of take a deep breath and say, okay, those are all just my anxieties coming up about it, and they're not real, and I need to actually find out, okay, what makes sense in this situation and what are the needs and can we help with these needs. And so in terms of my own community, I think it's something that we still have a long way to go on.
I'll take this in two texts. One is from the epistles, which is a part of the New Testament and Christian tradition, where the Apostle Paul has this great desire that all followers of Jesus would be one. And unfortunately, as in all religions, we tend to fracture. It's human nature. You know, my way's right, your ways are wrong. We fall into this behavior, unfortunately. But I would like to say from a personal standpoint, you saw in my, or heard in my biography that I'm from a little bitty town in East Texas. For those of you who are from Texas, think about that a second. I am from deep East Texas, behind the pine curtain. Prejudice is a way of life. Bigotry is a way of life. It's passed down from generation to generation. I am a living example of God's transformative grace. And my journey of compassion is still ongoing. And I've reached some milestones, but I have more to go. And as I look at my co-religionists, it is very difficult for me now. I had a conversation with one of my colleagues at work, another pastor, and I said, it's very difficult for me to go home because what is not explicitly stated in my biography is that the church that I pastor is 98% African American. And so it's difficult for me to go home, often because my relatives verbally persecute me for that. And so my job, part of my journey, is to continue to have compassion for my relatives and co-religionists who have not quite been as far on the journey as I've come. And so I continue to pray for them. And I continue to pray as I watch in horror at acts of hatred that are ongoing toward other persons made in God's image. So I'll just say I continue to pray and to grow and to follow in my tradition after the example of Jesus.
Those were great answers. Give them a round of applause for that one.
So please help me thank all the panelists here tonight for their time and wisdom.